Alrighty, everybody, welcome to the Laser Sports Academy podcast, edition 1. I'm really stoked to have a very special human in for our very first part of this journey. Mr. Andreas Kent, Mumin from Sweden, a guy who's been in the scene for a very long time. I'm going to go a bit more into his introduction very shortly first, but firstly, just want to say welcome along, mate, and thanks so much for jumping on.
Yeah, glad to be here.
Great. Yeah, when I heard, when you said yes to coming on, I was really stoked because you're a wealth of knowledge on laser sporting. You've been around forever. I'm going to let you kind of expand on that in a little bit, but I just wanted to share with everybody. Anybody in Europe or the US, there's no introduction required. The introduction is going to be very much for the Australian community, who it's pretty much the only place you haven't traveled yet. And yeah, I got an opportunity to meet you in 2019 at the Sweenats, and Andreas is, he's been around forever. He's a chief organizer in a lot of the tournaments over there, and probably best described as one of the figureheads in the European community. And you guys ran an amazing tournament that year, and the Swedish people were super hospitable. All the Europeans are always super hospitable for us Aussies, and took us out to the local theme parks and did all the fun things with us. So we had an absolutely great time, and the quality of the tournament was really high. I think we had, was it 10 teams, 10 to 12 teams?
Yeah, 10, yeah.
10 teams. So there was, it was a smaller tournament that we're used to, but it's, for getting a lot of high quality games into a short amount of time, it's a really good number. And yeah, we had our hands full for sure in that tournament. It was a real blast. So yeah, I just wanted to sort of open up, mate, with asking you just about your journey a little bit, if you could give us a bit of background. But very, very first thing, how do you actually get started in laser tag in the beginning, in laser sporting?
So my cousin started playing back in '95, and we were quite nerdy. So we were playing Magic the Gathering back then. And he told me like, oh, I have this other thing we're doing now that's really cool. You should join me. He was like 4 years older than me. And he's like, you should join in. And we went to play. I think it was '95, yeah. And it was V4, and I played with them. It was just like usual games. And the member scene back then was quite huge, and you could have like logins and stuff. So I really just fell in love with it from the get-go, more or less. So I started to play, and after a while, I started to go there on my own. Like we were like a crew going there, but I started going by myself just to play because I enjoyed it. And it was back then there was a lot of these members that would hang out just during the daytime. We don't get that much of that nowadays, but back then it was like a what do you call it, a youth central or something like that. It was always someone. Yeah. So there was sort of like a small community. Yeah. So I would be one of the small kids running around, hanging out.
I think there's a lot of people that probably don't recognize that before the internet was a big thing and before online gaming was a big thing, what teenage boys did was hang out at laser tag centers a lot. Like that were really popular. And it was once we got PlayStations and internet and online gaming, it really put a dent in that. People had other things to do with their time. So there was the same here in Australia. There was members nights, and you'd have big groups of people coming in to play, and that was how it's done. And did you guys start on version 4? Is that where you started?
Yeah, before, yeah. It was the first one, and it was I liked it because it was a very simple system. But it had a lot of faults. Like we used to play like 3 shots a second back then, so you would just spam the ground because you can't get shot if you're shooting, right? So you would just run around in the arena shooting the ground.
Yeah, we used to call it simfire. So if you were firing at exactly the same time as the other person, both people would cancel out, wouldn't they? Is that how it worked?
Yeah, yeah, more or less. Yes.
Yeah,
it was good times.
All the intricacies of the old systems. It was people don't know about pack problems these days. It was a different world.
Oh yeah, now all the batteries stay in place. You don't run out of battery in mid game. Nothing of that. Yeah,
exactly. So you started in this environment where people used to go and hang out at the laser tag center. And which venue was that at that you started?
Oh, it was Gothenburg. They moved quite a few times. Back then it was in the central parts, like just by where all the nightclubs and stuff are now. It was just right there, and because they wanted people to just do the drop-in. That's not as common anymore, at least not in Sweden. Now it's more on the outskirts of town because they want like companies or children's parties and stuff. It's not as beneficial now to be in the city center as it used to be. Yeah, it was just smack down in central Gothenburg, and there was people just coming in to hang out, so to say, just play a few games and move on with whatever you're doing that day.
Mm. And how did you guys get started playing competitions then, if it was just a members thing at that point?
Back then it was three teams, yeah, 3 teams, no bases, 4-2, like stun 2 seconds, dead 4 seconds, and 3 shots per second, right? So it was a very individualistic sport back then. So it was basically just the best of the best playing, and we would, like, the kids, our small group of people, and at some point they say, like, there's a tournament, you should join. There's people from other cities coming, and we said, all right, let's do this. And it was daytime back then, and I think it was 7 teams. 97, it was my first nationals, maybe 8, I don't really remember. And we played, and it was like, there was no structure to anything. You put on your pack and you go in. There's no focal points, no bases, no nothing. You just run around shooting people. And that's basically all you did during that. We ended up second to last. We didn't come last. I'm happy about that.
You've got to start somewhere, don't you? As a tournament, as well as a team. Yeah, I think the early stories of the Australasian Championships was very similar. Yeah, bit of a Wild West situation. I had an old player tell me that one of the teams went in and unplugged the gun cable just a millimeter or two before the game. So when they went into the arena, the first shot that they all fired didn't register, and they had to push the gun cable in. they all shot them, and then went and parked in their base for the entire game and defended them. So they had to come, and they were winning by, like, 600 points or something, and they just defended their 600-point lead for the entire game. It's like, oh my gosh, yeah, that's just hilarious. But hey, these are the stories that make it up, right? So it's something that in our previous conversation you mentioned was a real turning point was the White Fox visit to the US, and how much that changed the European kind of landscape. Just quickly, just run us through that, what happened there and how that kind of evolved the scene in Europe.
This was like 1999, I would say, something around there. And we have this player called White Fox, and he went to America. I'm not sure why. I don't know that part of the story, but he went there and he brought competitive, like what we know now as competitive laser tag back home from the US. And he was from the other side of Sweden, the East Coast. And they started playing with rules. It was still a loose definition of rules back then. Like the rule book was fine, but they adapted and took some time, right? So they hosted a tournament in '99. It was called Neo, and that had like rules for covering and stuff, and bases and lore for the first time ever. You should see those clips from lore. It was awful. We had no idea what we were doing, but we played lore, and it sort of caught on. And I know one of their players moved down to the West Coast, started teaching us how to play, and it's always the notion that you can go abroad and play, and like this is how it's played in America. Back then everything was like America, they do this in America, and we would do the same more or less. So we started with rules, but it wasn't until, I would say, Nationals 2003, which was an awful tournament, but it was the first time that we actually had some sort of standard to the rules. We still have a long way to go in that department, but there was something, you know. So a lot of people would say the first like modern Swedish Nationals would be 2003, and it was just Swedes back then. In the upcoming Nationals, I remember 2004, we had Finnish people over in Gothenburg for the first time. I think that was back then. I know Sulitol and Asna was there with their team, a strong team actually. And from there, Finland was really involved for a very long time, because Sweden was like the center where the skill was the highest. And then after a while, it would move on. When GP was formed, it really moved to Finland, where the skill is the highest, I would say, in the world right now, at least on the top tier. Mid tier would probably be stronger in Australia, but the top tier would probably be the best at the moment.
Yeah, I'd definitely validate that from my experience playing internationally and locally against them, and every other team in the world. GP are the number one team that I believe on the planet, and the biggest challenge in laser tag is going to Finland and trying to have a crack at that title. We're going to be watching them go at it actually in the coming weeks. In the coming week, actually, they start their nationals on Friday, so we look forward to hopefully sharing a little bit of links from their stream as well. So okay, cool. And that was kind of how things kind of kicked off. It was the Swedish scene was kind of the center for a while, until the Finnish guys sort of took up the mantle. And is that sort of still the case how things progressed over the recent years?
We actually have beaten GP a few times. Like if we play them, they will win 8 out of 10 times. Probably if it's on home court, it's 10 out of 10. But on a foreign arena, we do have like a small fighting chance against them. But the skill is still over there in Finland. When it comes to the organization and the actual setup of networks and getting teams to nationals, Sweden is still, I would say, on top on that. Like we have on the nationals now, we have France, America, Finland, Germany, and Sweden playing. And when you were here, we had more countries than worlds almost, I think. So
yeah, it was great. We had the Germans were there, Aussies were there, the Finns were there, the Swedes were there. We had a couple of French players. It was a real mix.
We even had Popeyes from New Zealand there.
That's right. Yeah, we did. He played for a US team. Yeah. Beat us, the buggers. But anyway. Thanks for that kind of bit of a lay of the land. I could talk to you for weeks about history, in European laser sporting history, but maybe we could delve deeper into some of those things in a future episode. But yeah, there's a couple of topics that I'm really excited to ask you about, because as you might be aware, we're going to be playing Helios 2 in the Australasian scene in Hobart next year. And one of the hot topics in Australia at the moment is how is it going to go for competition? And there's just not a huge amount of knowledge yet about how it's going to go and how it's going to adapt to competition play. But we do have a little bit of knowledge, and you've just come back from the US Nationals. You got to experience it. I wanted to ask you about that experience, and I saw a post that you posted on Facebook giving it a review, and I know that you're a very honest reviewer of things, so sparked my interest, mate. Can you tell us a little bit about the experience of going to US Nationals and playing on Helios 2?
All right. So first I'd like to say there were issues with the tech at the US Nats. So if I disregard all that bit, like some faulty packs and maintenance that could have been better, parts that could have been, where they should have been in the packs, we just put that aside. The system itself, for me, just personally, is the best system since, I would always say Nexus Pro is the best. Gen 2, not Gen 1, would be the best system so far. But it has always been lacking in consistency. Like some packs would be better than the others, and Helios Pro really fixed that. So if Helios 2, I wouldn't be able to say because of the tech thing if the packs were uneven, if that is the thing, but just the system was so good with the barrel sensor and the meta that's adding. I know a lot of people like the Helios Pro, but we've always had that very static, high posture sensor behind the wall panel stuff going. Right, it is the best way to play Helios Pro. And personally, I think it's boring. It's very one-sided, one-dimensional way of playing. And because of this barrel sensor, you cannot do that, because if you pop your gun at the same spot over and over, you will get shot in the gun, right? So you would need to be more flexible in how you hold your walls, you know, inside the base or wherever. Because now, instead of one guy throwing himself into the base to catch that sensor, now you could actually have someone going while the other player hangs back and tries to take out the phaser instead, like doing some sort of combos. And the defender would have to counter that by peeking out different heights of his panel. Like the meta, it gets so much more advanced. It will not be appealing to everyone, I understand that, but it does add more dimensions to the game. The IR is not as strong as in Helios Pro. A lot of people might not like that, but for me, like, if you hit, you hit. If you almost hit, then you don't hit, right? It's a very. Meanwhile, in Helios Pro, I sometimes think that even if I don't hit, I sometimes hit.
Yeah.
Which I think is disturbing with the level we actually play at, like traveling the world and on this laser tag system, it hits that when I don't hit, I still hit.
Yeah,
it's weird.
Well, the pure increase in the amount of doubles that happened completely kind of changed the meta of the game here in Australia. It became so much easier to double that. The way you set your defense up and everything like that was different. Like you just needed somebody who could stand at the main door that people were trying to punch through. If they could double every time, you're essentially defending your base. It's it makes it actually made it what we started seeing in Australia is a lot more like split dumps and things like that, because you could just continue to accumulate points by doubling, and then eventually you'd win one and get through the door. So it was an interesting change in the meta. You did mention, how this barrel sensor is going to change the meta of the game. Can you expand on that a little bit? What you think will happen? I know this is also relative to the settings that you guys play in the US and Europe, and maybe you could just talk about that a little bit. How the settings are different, so that other international teams can put it into context. In terms of how the barrel sensors will affect your game. But I'd love for you to expand on that a little bit.
So the barrel sensor is pretty sensitive. Like, we are all used to weapon sensors being there, but not really being shootable. You fire at the weapon and nothing really happens.
Yeah.
But that sensor is actually, it's not super easy. Like, it's not like you just kill everything when you shoot at the weapon. But if somebody points the weapon towards you, and because there's this rubber thing, right? So it's sort of a tunnel. So if it's on the side a little bit, you can't hit the sensor. But if it's pointed at you, then and you get at least 2 attempts, then you will hit, right? And that, I think it will change the base area play completely. And for us Europeans, it will change elim a lot, team elim. And that we play a lot. We always play that during tournaments. So that will change.
How will it change the ilim?
Well, it's harder to hold down positions, right? You can advance more. Like now, if you play Helios Pro and somebody holds down, like paneling a wall, it's really hard to push through, right? You need to work as a team, or like really throw yourself in there to get the shot. But now you can actually just try to make the guy shoot, and then you just stun him and you move up. But that's in theory, of course. I haven't actually played it on our settings with the 1 shot every 2 seconds. So.
Yeah. Well, I do remember. I remember here in Australia in 2001, we had a rule where you couldn't actually cover both sides of the phaser. You had to like tuck your thumb in on one side. If you were going to cover one side of the phaser, you had to tuck your thumb in on the other side in order to try and enhance the ease at which you could tag the phaser. And the skill that you're talking about was definitely a part of a game, having to put your phaser out at different heights each time. And the I can imagine how that would translate into a 1 shot per second game where, if you can get them to poke their phaser out, if the skill of actually picking where their phaser is going to come out and and tagging them in the phaser is really going to help. It's going to completely change the way tactically how you work the arena, how you sort of battle opponents and things like that. So I think it actually adds a skill to the game. My view of playing the world settings, when I say world settings, in Australia we kind of group anything that's 1 shot per second with stuns as world settings, but I know there's intricacies, and in Sweden things are played slightly different, and I'd love for you to expand on that actually, about how the intricacies of the game settings are across the different European scenes. I'd love for you to expand on that in a little bit, but that's what I've found is the addition of those pieces of the of the settings, being the 1 shot per second and stuns, adds skills to the game that don't exist necessarily in the Australasian format. The Australasian format certainly has its own things that it adds to the game that don't exist in the world styles format. For example, I think the our ability to, because we can get 2 shots out a second, the way the base play works, being able to take out multiple opponents when you come into a base, means that one person can crack multiple defenders. If he can crack the first defender, quite often he'll get the second one as well, because the second one will be facing the opposite way. So you see a lot of rotation of the people inside the base more frequently than what we were finding when we were playing the worlds. So and all those, so that's the kind of the different skill that you get on the Australasian format, but particularly on the world styles format, what I found is that the around the arena play, there was a whole bunch more skills in terms of having to predict when you can advance on opponents, and obviously the dodging aspect of it as well, being able to dodge a shot and then you've got a whole second to get a shot off. So and certainly with the being able to tag the phaser adds another layer of complexity to how you can play the game, which I always value, because I feel like that helps us separate the top level players, the experienced players, even more, when that's it's anything where we can kind of enhance the number of like micro skills in the game, I think is a good thing, as long as the game is still attractive for new players as well. So trying to find that balance is an important thing. So maybe would you like to talk a little bit now about the differences and the nuances in the way the game's played in Sweden, Finland, Germany, worlds. I know there's a lot of similarities, but I know there's a lot of little differences as well.
The biggest change, like people say, 1 shot per second. Of course, it's very obvious. It's just right there when you start playing, right? But I think that one of the biggest differences is the trigger lockout that we use, which changes the meta a lot compared to playing without any trigger lockout at all. It's hard for me. I have actually never played a tournament without trigger lockout. I hope to change that in Hobart if I manage to get over there. It's hard for me to just speculate on how a non-trigger lockout tournament actually looks. One thing is to see the base, but the base play is rather similar. But in the arena play with the trigger lockout and how you set up your defense without a trigger lockout, I'm not really sure how that
How
will
long
go.
is your trigger lockout?
It's different. It's 7 on Windows, and I think it's 5 on OSO.
Okay, so it's basically just a setting that you set, which basically, so for people who don't really understand lockout, it's essentially there's a period of time after you reactivate where you can't pull your trigger, correct? And if you do, you get like a time penalty.
Yes.
Before you can pull your trigger again. So it disincentivizes spamming the trigger essentially. Yeah, and if you fire a little bit too early, you get penalized. So you really got to nail the timing. Yeah.
Yeah, true. But it gives the advantage to whoever is active. Yeah. And it's like it's a question of taste. Like it's not a what is best thing. It's how we play. I mean, it's how our arenas are built and how everything is centered. It is the notion that the active player has an advantage.
It's totally true. Totally true. Hey, it's like a philosophical question that there is no better or worse. It's just there's a certain kind of wine, which is the active player has the advantage in a significant way. And like Nexus and the older system V4, they were all geared that way. And that's why a lot of the old school players love it that way, because that's what they grew up on. And then you've got the, the other philosophy, which plays more like Helios, where both players are kind of, the active player might have an advantage, but it's very slight. It's rarely can they take full advantage of it. Yeah. So totally agree with that one. And that's that's one of the beauties of going to play in Europe or at the Worlds is you get to experience that flavor of wine, so to speak.
Yeah. Sure. And I would say the second thing that it's not true for America because they do use it, but it's the lack of reloads. We don't use reloads typically. In the US they do if they can. It's not always available, but typically US tournament you will have reloads. And there's no place in Europe that uses reloads, so in Europe you don't get that.
Really? So none of the European tournaments use reloads?
Never. I've never ever used, well, in Worlds, of course, in France and but not in Finland. There was no. Yeah, there was reloads there as well. Yeah. So Worlds, sure. Rest of the tournaments, no. Why? I don't know. I do enjoy reloads on the comp format, but just it's never been a thing. Like I don't think anyone is actually opposed to it, but all arenas would need to be rebuilt, and I don't think that will ever happen. But so it's not really something we have against it. It was just never built in from the start.
Yeah.
And then it just became culture. And that's just how it is. And I'm curious.
Sorry. You
go.
Right. I was just going to ask the question.
I'm curious because you went here and you did play the Swedish nationals and there were no reloads. Did it impact the game a lot for you guys? Like, was there any part of it where you were like, oh, I wish there was reloads. This would have been a different thing.
Oh, never once asked that. However, I do feel like there is a set of skills that come with reloads. And one of the biggest benefits, I would say, is if you've got an arena which is kind of defensive, it can create the X factor where the game can break open, because essentially you just need to kind of run one of the defenders down till they need to get to a reload. As long as the reloads are placed far enough away that they have to invest 15 seconds to get there, it's where the games can break. If people don't manage the reloads properly, or suddenly that person has to go reload. Now there's a 2-on-2 situation. You can get the base, and as soon as that first base or second base goes down, quite often that's there's a team that's now losing. They need to do something to catch up, so they start playing more aggressive, and then the game starts to break open a little bit. So I think that's one of the main advantages of it. So but I didn't notice it in play, and maybe that's just because every other part of your format and settings is set up to support that style of game. So the game's still fun to play, and even without the reloads on. So, but it's probably important to note that you guys would play where if you're deactivated, you need to relinquish your position.
Always, yes.
Yeah, which is different in Australia. You only need to relinquish a spot. Well, if you're in an evacuation area, obviously you need to evacuate, but you only need to relinquish your spot if you actually run out of power and need to go to a reload. So yeah, you can have people just like parked in a position and just copying tags. If the arena's set up properly, it's shouldn't happen, but it has happened in particular spots in particular nationals where a player just sits there and their job is to cop a tag and hold a position and let nobody else stand there. So yeah, that's one of the disadvantages, I'd say, of that rule. Okay. And so in terms of like shots per second, deact time, all those things are kind of consistent across the different.
Deact, like Sweden is we're stubborn in some ways. So 7 seconds would be the standard. Like they changed. America was 8, but they changed to 7. Germany uses 7-second deact. 3-second stunts everywhere, regardless. And Finland would use 7 seconds. And I suppose if France would have a tournament, they would use 7 seconds as well. Worlds is still 8 seconds, but the stun time has been reduced to 3. It never happened because there was no Worlds. We'll get to that later, I suppose. But it is 3 once it's hosted next time. But Sweden has 6-3. And there has been some discussions about that. we don't really play comp. We call it comp, right? Your blue ribbon event. We do elim and a base run, base game, Swede format. You know, it has a lot of names, that format. That's our go-to formats, regardless where you end up. If you go to a members night in Sweden, you would basically get maybe a few games of comp. If there's a lot of people and we can make good teams from it, like maybe 6 games of comp, 2 on each color, and then maybe 10 games of elim, and then the rest of the time just base run.
Yeah,
more or less. So for us, it hasn't been a thing. We have the 6 seconds because it works good for the base run, right? And that is why we have 6 seconds on the comp as well. We were talking about switching to 7 seconds just to be in line with the rest of our geographic area, so to speak, the world's countries. But the thing is that it's not really a thing, but it happens so that Finland uses 1 shot per second on elim. So we said, okay, the day that Finland changes elim to 1 shot every 2 seconds, like the rest of the world, more or less, we will change the comp to 7 seconds.
There you go. The challenge has been laid down, Finland. Come and collaborate. Yeah, it's on the table. There you go. Yeah, that's really interesting. Just for all the European listeners as well and the Swedish listeners, here in Queensland, we train, essentially we call it Swedes, but we're essentially playing base run on our own settings, and that probably takes up 30-40% of our training each week. We train regularly every week. We'll have 20 odd players come down and smash it out in our kind of legendary Wednesday night trainings. And yeah, we utilize that format as a way to basically just enhance our base play essentially and get really enhance our game awareness. And that's what I got from the base run tournament in Sweden when I went, was it's just it's just a super fun, it's aggressive format where you basically are testing your capacity to work as a small group and enhance your the teams that are super tuned into each other and is hyper aware of the space and what's going on with the opposition players are the ones that come out on top. So yeah, it's really fun. And I think that's the one area I think we did okay. I think we got third and fourth in that one. Yeah, so we were okay at that, where we didn't have to actually tactically too much. Yeah, it's tactically we we're catching up. We're playing, what was that, 9-minute games as well? That's yeah. Is that how you guys play 9-minute games in most of your tournaments?
Oh, you mean the comp? Yeah, no, it was a time issue. It depends. It will be 10 typically in Finland and in Germany. 10 is not, we do 9 or 10, but we usually do 9 because I want to do the 3 set, the triplets. That's something I've been pushing for a lot as an organizer, and I've been doing surveys after every tournament, like, do you like the triplets? That's when you play 3 games, right? Like a grand final. So basically play like a 3-game round robin. Every round is like a game from red, a game from blue, a game from green against the same teams, and then you basically determine the winner of that round, and then they move on. Exactly. And the result is always the same. Never for a round robin, because the games aren't balanced enough to support a triplet. But always in finals. That's what all players say. Because it's a philosophy thing. Like I believe that the end game should be the largest part of the tournament. And usually what you end up with is like a full day of round robin, and then another day of cascade, and then yet another day of cascade, and then like a short day of system D. And for everyone, like the viewers, they want to see D. Like that's during the Aussie Nats now. I tuned in for system D, like I tuned in every day, but for system D, I really wanted to see because it was interesting. And there was like it was a consequence to every loss and every win, which it of course is the other days as well, but it's not as obvious for neither the players or the viewers. It's just there, it's just a game, And I suppose it's good if they win, but if they don't, they will still move on to the next stage anyway. So
yeah,
so just to have system D usually make up like 25% of the tournament is, I think it's fundamentally wrong. In most sports, what is the most like desired part is the end game, right? That should be that should be longer. And the best way to do that is with triplets, because it gives depth to each game. It's just my opinion, but
that's a really interesting philosophy. I've never thought of it that way, but it makes a lot of sense. I mean, from a spectator perspective, they want games to matter, right? So it makes sense that we would have more games that matter and less games that are kind of, I mean, they matter, but really more to the players and the teams, more so than the spectators. There's not as much on the line, so to speak, during those, especially the round robin games. But from a playing perspective, the players love it because they get to play every team in the comp, and the cascades are super fun because you're playing teams around you on the ladder. So it's good for all areas, regardless of your experience level or where you're playing at on the ladder. It's good for everybody. So from that perspective, it's great. But from a spectator perspective, it does make sense to increase the percentage of tournament that is allocated to finals. And certainly the 3-game series is like a really fair way to do it. We trialed it here in a tournament called the Rumble, and it went pretty well. Although the biggest challenge we had was that some teams played just ridiculous amounts of games. We had 10 games, and then they were literally limping into their final game, which I guess is a big part of it as well. It actually is a test of endurance as well, which probably can potentially make a greater case for the fact that we are a sport.
And also it puts more incentive on the cascades, right? You want to place higher because you don't want to go to that shore. And now it's like, if you are first or you're second, you're still going into the golden game, right? If you're third or fourth, it's still the game before you play 12 minutes, you win 1 game and you're in the golden game, right? Now it's, if you end up 8th or something, that's a lot of games and it will take a toll. So you better take the cascade seriously or you will have a problem. But what we do is that we play we do the D, but we do each ladder separately. So once you fail to advance, you will get a break for quite some time. Instead of like you can do all three like at the same time, which is the one that you use. It's good because all the teams doesn't have to be there in a sense, because they're not playing for a while, or they don't have to hang around. But if you just do the one ladder and then the other ladder and then the third ladder, there will be pauses like for the teams, like you play and like, okay, you play again in like 4 hours. So that doesn't work for me because I have 10 teams on my tournament, but for you it works very well because they will have like a break and then they will be back like maybe a little bit before, maybe they to do some ref or whatever. But they do get breaks between the ladders. It has its cons, but
that sounds like a really good way to do it. So the Queensland Rumble is a local, we call it an invitational tournament here in Australia, but we just run at a local site, usually over a weekend or something like that. So it's an opportunity just for people to get more laser tag in essentially and play something that's kind of a little bit more a higher credential than a league or a local regional tournament. Get teams from all around the country coming and playing it. So because it's not the nationals, it means we can experiment with things in terms of these kinds of things. So that's certainly something we'll think about next time we run a Rumble. We probably will continue with the 3-game series. We might modify how many teams do it. And we'll definitely look at that actually as a suggestion to break up the issue with them all playing lots of games in a row. So thank you for that, sir.
It's actually credit to Dexter in GP. He's the creator of that type of grid.
Oh, thank you, Dexter. Smart boy. I want to move on now, mate. I want to just to quickly, we are going to talk about the world soon, but just before we do that, I want to just talk about a little bit about the European scene. Something happened in the last couple of years. Not sure if you're aware. So if you could share it with us a little bit about, how the European scene is looking post-pandemic, and what are the major tournaments at the moment in the scene? What are the organisers working towards in Europe at the moment? Just to give some of our international viewers a little bit of a lay of the land over there.
All right. So it's basically centered around 3 major tournaments each year, and it's supposed to be a European Championship every third. So it's supposed to be like Worlds, 1 year of rest, and then European. But now we haven't had that for a while. But on a like regular year, you would have Swedish nationals, Finnish nationals, German nationals, which would be the 3 biggest one. Maybe not the most competitive. Like that might be some other. And then most sites would have like 1 tournament, like Slanish has 1 in Borås. It would have 1 in Gothenburg, and usually there would be 1 in Stockholm, but they're stuck on the Nexus Gen 1, so that won't happen for a while. And Tampere, where Legacy, you played Legacy, right? Their home arena, they would have 1. And that's the layout. So what has happened after COVID is that some sites are closed. Also, we lost some really good member sites. In Finland, we lost 1 in Rovaniemi, that's just on the Arctic Circle. They used to have a Arctic Circle tournament, so either it was night all the time when you were there, or it was daylight all the time when you were there. It was quite interesting. And Watch Dogs, a very good German team, their home arena got closed down. So there has been a change. And before Corona, Finnish nationals was like 24 teams, and now it's 13. Last year, I don't remember how many it was. It was 16 something. Now it's in a very remote location, so I suppose that plays in a little bit. Germany they had a league going and stuff. I'm not sure what the state is on that right now. Sweden, we have sort of benefited from COVID because we had no lockdowns, in difference from the rest of Europe. So we just kept playing like nothing happened. We had a few local tournaments and stuff. So we have few teams from the start. So now we have maybe 4 or 5 teams, something, instead of like 3 as it was before. France, I'm not really sure. They have their own league that is close to outsiders. It's not really close. We could actually in theory play it, but nobody does because the requirements are too high. So I'm not sure how their situation is. So I would say, as it looks, Finland has taken the biggest hit because there are 10 teams short of how it used to be. We're going there on Thursday to play the Nats. Germany is their league, I don't know. Nationals, same amount. Sweden, more teams. So that's how I would rate it.
That's so interesting that you didn't have the lockdowns in Sweden. Things have grown. It just is a testament to it has nothing to do with the sport. Like we've got our family and people love playing it. It's purely circumstantial. So it gives me great confidence that we can build out back up again. Yes, and what about in terms of organisers in Europe? Have you managed to maintain a lot of the sort of, I've got kind of call them figureheads, people like yourself who do a lot of the organising of things in the local communities? Have we managed to retain those people?
Yeah, Germany is very strong right now on the organisation front. Yeah, their nationals is like really well organised, and they have players who are. They have volunteers that used to be players that now are volunteers, or players playing in like maybe lower ranked teams that are doing the work, and that is the best recipe, right? You have the same in Australia with a lot of players who have been top tier players, but now play in mid or lower tier, and they can put more energy in getting the tournament like really good, and they have authority, but they are not competing for the title, which is never a good combo. Like people with authority with the possibility of actually winning, that is not a good thing, right? In Sweden, it's usually me and Slanish. You met Slanish, right? He was Peter. Yeah.
I call him Swedish Beefy. We have a player in Australia called Beefy that I played with, and he's just a Swedish version of him essentially. So yeah, and Beefy's a good friend of mine. So we got along very well.
That's cool. So we would run like Swedish nationals. He's running the tournament, and I run the the grids and the schedules, and I'm the head ref. And we would have a few volunteers that would help out, like players coming back, like older players doing maybe commentary or similar. In Finland, it's more complicated. They have a lot of know-how, but they're having some troubles getting it together for the Nats. They have had a lot of fantastic tournaments over there. And I think they are setting up like a new organization. They have like a council that runs, in difference from Germany and Sweden, where it's just people who usually do it, like they will do it or make their own small group and just make it happen. In Finland, they have the council, and they have some change of guards now, I think. So I have high hopes for Finland, because it is the center of laser tag in Europe. So we want the Finnish Nats to be like that, should be the best Nats. And the guy who's in charge of zone there, they have like an agent who has Finland. Tapio, he's really like committed. He really helps out. He really is very supportive of the sport in comparison to Sweden. So we're hoping Finland will be getting there soon.
Yeah. That's it's gonna be interesting to watch Finland, see how the handover happens. I was always taught by my predecessors in the mid 2000s that the role of a council or committee is to always be training their replacements. And I think it's so true. It's if we really want to create something sustainable with longevity, we need to be always thinking about who are the next generation of leadership and people who are going to manage tournaments and organize communities and all that kind of thing. It's such an important part of it. So yeah, on that discussion, mate, let's delve now into Worlds a little bit. You're the president of the Worlds Council, stepping in for Doc, who had some medical things happening that he had to deal. So you've picked up that mantle there. We were supposed to go to Kuala Lumpur in, what year was that supposed to be? 2021 or 2020? It's hard to know now. a couple of years ago.
When was Belfort? Was 2017, so 2020 was supposed to be.
2020 it was supposed to happen in 2020, and obviously things happened. We didn't get there. Where are we at with the Worlds? Are we is the consensus from the council that we want to continue to go to Malaysia? Do we want to move on? And what is our philosophy for selecting sites as well, in terms of, we can go to sites with an experienced community, or we can go to sites where there's an opportunity to grow grassroots or new communities. What's the philosophy of the council in terms of site selection as well?
As it is like from the start, it has been, I came in, I haven't been on the council super long. I joined in 2018. And back then the strategy was to host Worlds in a new geographical area to try to get a foothold for the sport, which they did in France, they did in Finland. Finland already had a scene, but Worlds helped. And they were supposed to do it now in Kuala Lumpur, and we had teams from Singapore, Malaysia, and Thailand that were supposed to participate, right? Which would have been good if we could get all those 3 countries into the zone family. So the thought behind it was really good. So where we're going from here now is that we need to ask ourselves the question, like, should we go for the established countries and try to make Worlds a high-end tournament with all the tech and people on ground that knows, and site owners who knows what it's all about, or should we try to find other areas and try to expand on that, like to spread the sport? And it's always a tough call, because it's good for the sport, right, to go on the new frontier bit, but it's better for the players who's actually playing it to be at a site where they know that the people who work here and the site owner and whoever does tech know exactly how things should be. It eases a lot of things. So, but it's a democratic organization, so we have I don't know how many council members we are now. It's New Zealand, Australia, the US, France, Sweden, and Finland. So there's 12 of us. So what will happen is that we will move on from Malaysia. We will not host that tournament. We are still settling some scores with them. Some council members are in contact with them regarding some details of our exit. And we will move on to somewhere else. So it will be the usual process with sites sending in what's it called, applications, just like in Australia or wherever, and then the council will vote on these. And it's actually up to every country to talk to their councilmen on where they want worlds to go, and from there the council members will vote. And I know that we do have, like, we try to go, like, we do have, Sweden has never had worlds, and New Zealand has never had worlds, that is, and Germany has not had worlds. So of course, it sounds good, like, but it's still a vote on where it ends up. There are no like real rules for it, but America has had it twice, for instance. So,
do we count the first one?
They insisted on it, so yeah. It's not helping them.
Well, just to put that into context, the first one was early 2000s, wasn't it? Was it early 2001? 2001, yeah. And then the second one in Finland was in 2009, and there was quite a big gap, and there was not really anybody at 2009 that was at 2001. There was a few players, but there was a majority of new players. So yeah, but yeah, and then we went back to Syracuse in the US in 2011. But so some people joke around if 2001's counted, but of course it is. Yeah, so yeah, that's interesting. And I think for me, it was my biggest concern about Malaysia was the arena, and going to a place where there hasn't been a tried and tested competition before. And, you know, we can always adapt and adjust, but as an enthusiast and a lover of laser tag, I was always going to go to Malaysia, and I totally like love the idea of having an Asian contingent in our family. So that would always override my, you know, concerns about the arena. But yeah, as a player and a competitor, my instinct is, oh my gosh, are we going to get an arena that is going to actually allow the best teams to win, essentially. We don't want an arena where the result might be affected by the fact that the arena is not that even, or that it's you know, it can be compromised in some way. So yeah, that's it is a massive discussion. I don't know the answer to that. I think it just needs more conversation between people and getting people's views on it publicly about, you know, because we do need to get the best, you know, to be a Worlds, we really want to get the best players and best teams there, don't we? So we do have to honour that desire from the top players and the top teams from each country at the same time. So hopefully we can find something that kind of ticks both boxes. I love the idea of going to Germany. I think that, you know, how far they've come as a scene over the last 10 years, to be able to go to a place like Germany would, you know, be a great recognition of the work they've done there. But I'm not sure what's happening at a local level there. Would it really give any other surrounding countries a boost, or yeah, I'm not aware of whether that would be the case. But anyway, is there any locations kind of on the list of possible possibilities at this stage?
No, we haven't progressed that far that we're actually sending out the applications. We do have a few topics that needs to be discussed first. But I know, like, if I remember correctly from last time, I know Dunedin was interested. And I know that there's German sites that are interested, and I know Philadelphia was interested. I didn't actually hear that from the site owner. I've heard it from the players, but I know Stockholm wants to, but they need to get their system in place. And well, that's like what I heard so far, but you never know, you know. Some might have, you know, pulled out, and some might have joined in. You know, we'll see that once the application opens.
Oh, well, I might add, I'd also be totally behind a Swedish Worlds as well for the same reasons I mentioned before. It'd be great to go to Sweden. It's a recognition of the contribution you guys have made over the years, and yeah, we haven't been there yet, so why not, essentially. So yeah, what do you think with Worlds? Kind of, what's the way forward for Worlds? What in terms of the tournament itself? You know, when you first start any new tournament, right? You're starting from ground zero. So in terms of our ability to attract the best teams and the quality of the management of the tournament, what do you think the next sort of, how are we going to enhance the Worlds in that respect going forward?
The Worlds is based on the old American settings, which is not a setting that exists. But there's no 8-3 anywhere in the world. We still have 8 because of Australia, right? And we have 3 second stunts because of the rest of the world. We have reloads for America and Australia, and we have like 2 shots a second for elim for Europe, and it goes a little bit like that. The problem with Worlds is that it's a format that does not exist in the rest of the world.
So true. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, I know, right? It's a non-existing format. So regardless of where you end up in the world, you can be sure that nobody actually plays the true world settings, unless they're practicing for Worlds. That is something that is a problem. So the way that we did settings right now, it might be interesting for some to know. So we have actually gone through. We had a group with players from like we had I think it was Popeyes, and we had what's his name? Gizmo was from Australia, and Dark Omen, myself, and I think it was Punisher from the US, and we just went through all the settings in all the formats, and we had what is it now, what we want it to be, and if somebody wanted to change, we would vote on it, just to get like a consensus on the settings, so everyone was in. Like Australia had a guy representing, New Zealand had, like everyone was in, and there was discussions, and the outcome is still not a setting that is existent. So either I don't actually know how to get past that part, because we do play differently all around the world. So and nobody really wants. Just for the, like, even if, like, let's say the Aussie way of playing comp, nobody would really let it go all the way there, right? We don't want to put all the eggs in that basket. Like we don't want everything to go to Europe, and we don't want everything to go to America. So it's sort of a pull thing. So I think we would actually have to start there. I'm not sure how, but in some way we need to get the World's format to be a format that resembles however we play in the rest of the world. And until we play the same in the whole world, it's not theoretically possible. The second would be to find the thing is, you put Worlds in Europe, it's not going to be many Australian teams, right? You put Worlds in Australia, there's not going to be many European teams. You need to enable in some way teams to participate. We can see in Australia the best team. Well, now it's Catalyst, but let's say Wolfpack for the sake of because everyone knows who they are. I mean, what's the average age? Like, can they afford a 2-week trip to Europe just like that? I mean, it's really hard, right? That is also something. It should be accessible, and that is also something that's not easily solved. There need to be some way of getting money into it from a third party, and that's not really where we are right now. So there's a lot of these things to work out to get the old school players, because they're picky, right, with the formats and the settings, and the young players who are really willing to play anything, but they don't have the funds for it. I think that is the main problem that we have, and the way forward from that is above and beyond my knowledge, really.
Yeah, it's a tricky
But
question because I think one of the beautiful things about the sport as well is, you know, you have this European style game and then you have this Australasian style game, you might call it, and they're both beautiful in their own way. And you know, I think that's something worth valuing is the diversity as well. The ability to play the game slightly different in different countries, I think is great. So this idea of blending all into, you know, the problem with it though is this exact thing where trying to get a consensus on a world's format is difficult. If you know, in another galaxy where if laser tag players didn't mind playing two different sets of settings in the same tournament, we could actually play both game styles, which would be interesting. But generally, laser tag players aren't a massive fan of that, doing that. But that's possibly you know, one of the only solutions I can kind of think of at the moment.
I've been thinking about that as well. Like, I think that's a viable idea, but it comes down to two things. It's that bases that you use for 1 shot per second and bases that you use for 2 shots per second, they are, from what I understand, not having played Aussie Nats, of course, but are vastly different. What works for a 1 shot per second game as a base is not really good for a 2 shots per second, and vice versa. That would be a problem. We would need to have bases that can be, like, the lines need to be redrawn in a good way, and then we need to have a lot of influence of how the arena layout is. That would be the first problem. The second would be time issues. Now, I'm a huge fan of 15-team competitions. I think I think it's the best number. So if we could actually have a 15-team competition, then it would be doable. But as it is now, we are aiming for a higher number, and then it's not possible anymore, unless you do it half-heartedly, which is not a good way to go. Discussions has been like we should remove the triples format. This is just on the table. This is not decided, and instead add the Aussie doubles, for instance, with Aussie settings. Would still need bases that would translate good into that, but like things like it's the easiest way is to work with the side events, right? That's where you usually end up. But to another option would be to just get rid of a few side events and expand on the comp and diversify that. That would be a way to go if there's time and there's not too many teams. It's possible.
Yeah, I'd love for the World Council to continue discussing some of those ideas. I think that's I think the players would be totally open to some radical change, and there's that much of a gap between the worlds. There's that much of a turnover. There's a lot of new players every single worlds. I don't think, you know, there's probably some loud voices that have been around since the dawn of time, but essentially in terms of the vast majority of the tournament, I think that's not necessarily the case. I think progression would be, generally would be totally accepted and encouraged. From the vast majority of the play group. So, yeah, certainly look forward to what the World Council have coming up ahead of us, mate. Have you guys got kind of any sort of? Can you provide us any timelines in terms of when the rest of the world might know more about the plans for the World Council?
I'll say we will discuss it now in Finland a little bit, I suppose. And we do have a few decisions that are guiding. So hopefully it should actually be pretty soon, at least with the going out with the applications and stuff. We got Jono, who joined the World Council, and he's really active. Like he's doing a lot of work right now. And Simi Bear has been she's occupied with the Aussie Nats, right? So hopefully she has more time, and then we will get things moving again. Like I'm reluctant to do the things that requires like writing formal things. I'm not a native speaker. I like to leave that to the native English speakers. It's much more easier than doing it to myself. It's not my strong suit, really. But one thing that needs to be resolved is also one thing we're discussing now that I can talk about is that should we send out applications and find out where next Worlds is, or should we first vote for a new president? That is sort of where we're at right now. Because like, let's say that Worlds end up in New Zealand. Even if I wanted to, it would be stupid to have me as a president, right? I would be on the wrong side of Earth at the whole time. And likewise, it would go the other way around, right? And it's also that I don't know people in New Zealand. This is an example. I'm not promising New Zealand or New Zealanders.
Everyone in New Zealand is like simultaneously cheering right now. Got a nationals in 2024 and a world's probably the year after. Fantastic.
Yes, and if it ends up like in Sweden, then I would be a very good candidate for presidency. So my suggestion is, let's find out where it is, and then we will vote for president, or we vote for president now, because this whole bit of work with all the papers and forms and applications, it's not something I'm used to. So, you know, in all honesty, it's not really how I'm used to running things, and it's how it should be run. So in that sense, it might be better to have someone with more experience in that field. So we are not sure about that part.
Yeah, I think with committees and things like that, I think it's underrated just how important it is to vote people in that actually have the space and the time to put in, because there's just so much work involved. And yeah, specifically with, you know, when you have a specific need at the moment, I think you're right in that the Worlds is at a place where it needs systematization. Something that Simi kind of has really helped bring to the Aussie scene, where she comes from a kind of corporate background where compliance left, right and center, and you know, there's a form for filling out a form and all this kind of stuff. That's you know, frustrating for some people, but it's actually a really important part of what you do in terms of record keeping and making things professional. And specifically when you're getting into you know, caring for under 18s, and stuff like that, you need to make sure that you got all your compliance right when you've got kids coming to tournaments and stuff like that. So yeah, I think it's a good move to vote in the right fit, the person that can, you know, contribute based upon whereabouts the tournament's going to be. Essentially, I think it's a really great idea, mate. I'm going to move on now. We're nearly done. I've got to acknowledge as well, it's probably, what time is it? 1 a.m. in the morning there or something like that, or just after midnight?
Nice.
Yeah, so thank you so much for staying up all through the night to be with us tonight, mate. I appreciate that.
It's fun.
I just wanted to finish on just maybe a bigger picture question. You know, somebody who's been around the scene for a long time, I really kind of value your kind of philosophy on this, but you know, laser sporting globally, you know, kind of where do you see us, you know, as a sport, and what are the two things that we can, or a couple of things that you feel are gonna take us forward as a sport? And I guess as part of that as well, I mean, we need to ask ourselves what is actually progressing the sport. I guess that's one question. So in your eyes, what is progressing the sport, and what are a couple of ways that we can actually achieve that?
That was a long question.
Sorry, another for somebody who's up at midnight.
So the first thing is, okay, so on a personal note, the community, the global community is, for me, the way forward, as we are now, you know, where we are right now. Like the bridge building, like I always speak of the devil, like I was just about to say, Americans coming to Sweden for this Nats, and I actually posted next year's Nats already, because I managed to get rent my site, well, where I play, and Slick signed up. Yeah,
Slick is coming to your Nats next year.
Yes.
Oh, that is amazing. Oh my God, I want to come now.
Yeah, it's still like, you know, it's like a year away and things can happen, but it's still pretty awesome, right?
That's brilliant. Oh, that's going to get so many players there, just knowing that he's going to be there.
But this whole part, like building the bridges, like Australians coming to Sweden to play, you know, having a good time, Swedes going to Australia to play, and this person-to-person connection, and everything that enables. Like if you would have a team, you come here and money was an issue, we would set you up with a place to stay. Like some member would like, I have a summer cabin or whatever. Like we will sort these things out, and that will make it more possible to travel. And for that to happen, people need to meet up, right? Get to know each other and play together against each other. And I think this whole globalization of laser tag, can I say that? Is that proper English?
Can't say that. Yeah. We're globalists right now. We're like the elite. I should be sucking on a cigar right now.
So that's and it really kicked off. It has been in the making for some time, but it really kicked off during Worlds in France. It was amazing in that sense. Like we laid the foundation for the European Championships there, but established a connection with Australia, with the Cobras in New Zealand, with Jono and Danny and all of these guys, and the Americans. The Americans was there with a non-toxic team. Can I say that? That's fine. You can cut it off if you want to. And it was that was the best part. Like the tournament, like the organizer David, like he was really supportive of what we were doing, and like it was so good in that sense, right? And from there, like getting the Germans aboard, we have Marion going there, and I invited them to come here and play, and we went there to play, and this like bridge building going on, and it's happening. It's just not me, it's everyone. People are doing it all across the Europe and America as it is now, and it makes it so much easier for players to move across borders. And when we have players starting to play at my side, I tell them like, well, you play with us for a year and we'll teach you the ropes, and then we'll go to Germany and play, and we'll take you with you, you join us, and then someday we go to America and we play there. I mean, it's and all you need to do, you play 2 years to learn everything, and then you can go to like 3 years, then you can go to Australia, join a low tier team, and you can just play. And we know people there, right? You won't be just landing in Australia. We know people in like Melbourne or in Brisbane or wherever you end up. Like there's people there, right, that we know that take you in, and you'll have a good time. And I think that part, it makes people more inclined to also stay in the sport.
Yeah.
Most people who quit, either they have won too much, tired of it, or they feel like there's nothing more for the sport to give you, right? There's no prize money, there's nothing like that. But this whole notion of traveling the world, playing, meeting people, having drinks somewhere in some obscure town in Australia, or in a beer garden in Germany with all these people you never met, but they're like family anyway, that will progress the sport where we are now, and it's happening.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think like individually, each area or region, we have quite a small communities, but when you look at laser sporting collectively across the globe, we actually are significant. There's like a lot of people that play, so it's those bridging connections and everything is where we're going to, I guess, we're going to build our community to not just the 50 people that's in this country or the 50 people that's in that country, but we're going to be like a community of 500 to 1,000 people globally. And if whatever the sport decides is the next progression for the sport, it takes like many people to make great things. You can't know what one individual can do it. So suddenly when we've all these people are together actually connected, suddenly we find we have the group of people that are needed to help the sport progress through whatever stage it meets at each step of the way. So and there's a big part of this project, the Laser Sports Academy, is we really desire to help that bridging goal that we have. So so we're really looking forward to continuing our connection with yourself and the European community, sharing as much as we can about your tournaments that you got coming up, any streams that you have, and the our philosophy on the Laser Sports Academy is that we want to create a platform for anybody in our community to create content, and we can do it in a cohesive way. And God forbid one day people might even make a career out of it. That would be the ultimate goal.
That would be awesome.
We've got some ways to go, but you've got to start somewhere, and that's what we aim to try and provide as a platform for people to do that. So,
all right. But let me ask you a question there.
Yeah.
So, do you think that, like, if we disregard the growth and the community we have, and we look at the sport aspect, is it viable to have a sport with 3 teams in the arena? If you're putting like some prize money or whatever in there, do you think it's possible? Like, I love the format. Yeah. It's not that. It's just that it's always something that I feel like it will be a weird thing. Like, if there's like a lot of prize money, and then you send 3 teams in with the money as an what do you call it? Like a reason to play the actual game. I see a lot of trouble down the road.
Yeah. So I've got a kind of a philosophy on this, a pretty strong one, and the best analogy I can give is you guys don't play cricket in Sweden, do you? Do you know about cricket?
Well, yeah, my dad played.
It's the game where the English play, where they stand there with a bat and they hit the ball into the fence and stuff. So cricket has a version of the game called Test cricket. It's a 5-day game. It's notoriously boring. It's basically got the most amount of skills in it. It's the game that all the players love the most because it's the greatest test of endurance and all the skills that they learn playing cricket. But essentially cricket went through a crisis where they didn't have the viewers required to maintain the sport, essentially. So what they created was a thing called 2020 cricket, which was a shortened format. It was a 3-hour format. They played 20 overs each way. It's done and dusted in 3 hours. It doesn't quite have the depth of skills, but it has massive hits over the fence. All they do is go out there and try to whack the ball every time. Like, it's super entertaining, and it was basically the adrenaline that cricket needed in order to sort of become mainstream essentially again. And I feel like what we play at the moment is Test cricket, and what the progression of the sport will be is creating a 2020 version of laser tag. And my belief is that the biggest issue we have is spectatability of it. We have a lot of we got a very complex arenas with lots of dark corners. You need 30 cameras to cover it. It's very hard to commentate and follow what's going on, particularly with the 3-team aspect that you spoke about. And I feel like what we play at the moment, I think, is special, and we got to cherish it. And especially the tournament that I grew up playing, the Australasian Championships, is just such a special tournament. Like, there's just nothing like it, and the community is so special. And like you said, we can travel anywhere in Australia, and we've got somewhere to stay, and we know people. And I think preserving that is really, really important. But if our goal is to grow the sport and get more people following it and potentially talk about prize money one day, we need to enhance the spectatability of the sport, because that's where the money's going to come from. And there's many ways, many ideas around how to do that, but I believe a smaller version of the game played between, if it is a 3-team game, it might be 3v3v3 or 2v2v2 or something like that. Potentially simplify it so a new viewer can understand the game very easily. We can share it with mum and dad and grandpa and grandma, and they can kind of clue onto what's going on much easier. We can see much more of the field in a small space. I'm not sure if you watched the triples in Bendigo. That's kind of a step in that direction. I don't really like how inflatable barriers play. They don't really feature the skills that are the main features of our game. So I feel like a different style of arena will be needed to really do it properly. But yeah, once we can get more eyeballs on the game, we can start to generate revenue. Then we can do things like pay referees, provide prize money. And my belief is that the prize money thing can't happen until we actually simplify the job of what the referee has. So simplifying the game is going to be really important, because at the moment it's just too easy for referees to miss things because there's so much happening. Then they're not paid. They're not professional referees. We don't review the referee's job. We don't watch them make calls or non-calls, and they're not held to account on any of that, because everybody's just volunteering their time, which is you know, a natural outcome of it. So yeah, the original kind of source of the solution for me anyway is creating the sport into something that's more broadcastable, or creating a version of it that's more broadcastable. At the same time, making sure we, you know, make decisions, you know, with the Swedish nationals and the Australasian nationals and everything that preserves the integrity of what we want those things to be, because they are special. So they will continue to be the test cricket of laser tag. But creating another version that people can appeal to, it'll create a different clientele. It'll attract a different kind of person, and that's totally fine. That's natural when you start opening up to a bigger audience. But for me, that's kind of my kind of philosophy or view on how we get to the next phase, if we believe, you know, getting more people into the sport is valuable. And I've got to a stage in my life where I see how much benefit laser tag has had for a lot of people, particularly kids who play junior league at my sites and people who play leagues. There's a lot of people that aren't into traditional sports. They love laser tag. There's a lot of people that are into traditional sports that love laser tag. But what I do know is that there's like dedicated people like yourself, myself, and others in other countries that are like lifers. We're not going anywhere. We just love this game so much. We're committed to it. Yeah, that's, you know, that's why I believe it's worthwhile, the endeavor of opening that up to more people, because I think there's more people on the planet that could, you know, benefit from having laser sporting in their life and being part of our community. So yeah, that's kind of my kind of philosophy on that whole piece in a nutshell, mate. I'm not sure if any of those thoughts have crossed your mind before.
Yeah, I would agree. I'm like, if there's any, at least for the, you know, foreseeable future, any money that we can sort of salvage from sponsorship or whatever should always go to the actual tournament, or to benefit all the teams, like whether it would be free lodging or free and no entry fee, or you know, whatever it would be. It would be the most soundest thing to do. Just throw prize money in there as it is now would be the weirdest thing. Not a good solution at all.
Totally, absolutely.
So I'm totally with you. I don't see the point of watching test games, but everything else, you know,
and even the people that are into test cricket, they kind of look at the score, walk away, do other things for half an hour, come back, watch the score. So that's a little bit like laser tag too when you're watching the Australasian Championships.
Yeah,
it goes for 10 days. It's just like, oh my gosh, it just goes on and on and on and on and on. So yeah. It's definitely for some people, but not for everybody.
Yeah, my dad used to play on the national team in Sweden. We have a national team here as well, mainly expatriates. But yeah. So I've been at the games, and they're like, and I know what's it called, the Ashes.
Yeah.
And the TV is, you know, booked for like a week, something like that, just to watch one game. Yeah, I know.
Oh, good. Here's me explaining to you cricket. You been to the Ashes. There you go. That was a silly endeavor, but
yeah.
Oh, mate, it's been absolute pleasure sharing some time with you today, and I really appreciate you staying up late. I hope you've enjoyed your time on here. Have you got any parting words you'd like to say before we complete for the day?
Yeah, we should have more Australian players in Europe, right?
Well, I think this conversation hopefully will inspire a few. But yeah, it's a question I get from you guys regularly is, oh, why is there no Australian players interested in coming to our tournaments?
Yeah, it's an honest question, actually. Yeah, it's just not something we're saying. Like, we do have, I think building that is the next big thing, right? Building the bridge between Australia, New Zealand, and Europe. I think once that is achieved, I think great things will happen.
Absolutely.
And it might end up with both our formats evolving, actually.
Yeah.
Because neither is perfect, and there's room for you know, unifying stuff, but it needs to come from the player base and not just us old people who are used to certain ways, right? It has to come from the new upcoming top tier players.
Yeah. Well, now you've got Slick coming to your Swedish Nationals next year, mate. I'm going to be looking at my calendar. I promise that. So, yeah, and I can definitely verify that a trip to Europe for any Australasian player is definitely worthwhile. You'll get a real challenge. Like if you want to test yourself as a player, go and learn another communities format. Go play on their home deck and really test yourself. Like it's definitely worth it. And the side benefit, which is the main benefit, is you get to spread your wings, meet a whole bunch of people in our family essentially. Who it's funny how globally we attract a certain kind of people. And I've found everywhere I've travelled, I've met people who are just like my people essentially. People that friendly, love to compete, but also love to socialise outside the arena. And so I would encourage anybody from Australasia to really follow what we're sharing, and follow some of the communities in Europe, and start to save your pennies and start asking a few friends in the community if there's a chance of putting together a team for some of these tournaments.
Yeah.
Awesome, mate. Well, thanks so much for jumping on tonight. We're in a different time zone, so it's probably all of the above. Hopefully, I'd love for you to jump on again in the near future, mate, if you're open to doing that. And good luck in the Finnish Nationals this weekend too.
Oh, thank you. I think we actually have a chance. I almost won it once, and I did a Lakio in the finals and we lost with 200 points.
Wow. What I love about that story is that you call it a Lakio. That's the main thing I love about that story.